We got to talk, lads, because we got to talk about how Arsenal lost his 2023 Premier League title, or how City stole the Premier League title. But I got to give my opinion on how I think that this all came about, right? We got to react to what this season was, because first of all, we got to take a second and look at it from neutrals of football fans, and we got to be like, yo, Arsenal, thank you for what you gave us, because if it wasn't for Arsenal, this Premier League would have been over before the Qatar World Cup. City would have just ran away with this thing. And at the end of the day, City did run away with it. Arsenal did run away with it up until City learned how to play with Haaland. The big thing that Arsenal took advantage of was the fact that City didn't know how to use Haaland correctly. Even though Haaland was scoring goals, you could see that Kevin De Bruyne didn't really know exactly how to play with him. Bernardo Silva didn't know how to play with him. I mean, it's the first time that Man City had an actual, stable number 9 in a long time, right? Obviously, Gabriel Jesus is an amazing number 9, but he's a guy that ran around, right? He was more of a mobile number 9. You're playing with a legit number 9 now. In the box, he could tap it in, he could bang it in from pretty much anywhere in the box, number 9. And I know we're talking about how Arsenal lost it, but the truth is Arsenal really put up a fight against a team that they shouldn't have put a fight up against. But we do got to talk about what happened. And the first thing that I want to bring up before we jump into how this disaster happened is Euro 2024 qualifiers. This makes not a lot of sense to a lot of people. You're going to say, why are you showing me this? Portugal played on March 23rd and on March 26th, which means there was Euro games in the week of March 20th all the way to March 23rd. I need you guys to remember that, because another thing that I'm going to bring up to you, and I know this is completely different, but I want to talk about a few teams that were completely dominating their leagues before this date. One that I'm going to bring up and one that I know familiar is Benfica. I'm a Benfica fan, but if you go back to March, in March, Benfica was completely, and I mean completely, just dominating everybody. They weren't losing games. You can see here 2-0, 3-1, 2-0, 2-0, 5-1, 3-1. 3-0, 5-1, 1-0, dominating until this game where they only won by 1. And then they lost to FC Porto. Now, what does this all have in common? Well, this game took place April 2nd. What's that? That was their first game back after the international break. Now we look at Arsenal. Arsenal was dominating, and they tied their last game before the international break with Sporting. Then they played one more game before the international break where they won against Crystal Palace. And their first game back from the international break, they also won comfortably. And then the disaster happens. Now, does some of this have to do with the international break? When there's teams competing for the top trophy, the number one thing is consistency. That's how you win a league. That's how you win a title. That's how you become champions. Consistency. Consistency is everything. The most consistent team usually wins the league. Arsenal was consistent until that break. And even though they won the game on April 1st, if you look at what Benfica did, they also won their game on April 2nd. But then after that win, Arsenal won on April 2nd, Benfica won on April 2. I want you to pay attention to what happens after Benfica loses to Porto. They then lose to Inter, lose to Chaves, which is a team they should 100% beat, tie to Inter, barely beat Estoril, and then beat Gil Vicente, then barely beat Braga, and then finally get back to actually cooking, but there's one game left in the season. Now, the difference between Arsenal and Benfica is that Benfica had a huge gap of 10 points when they went into this Porto game. Well, it could have been 10 points if they beat them. Porto beat them, so it stayed at 7 points or something like that. It was something crazy like that. So even with Benfica tying when I'm making this video, all Benfica needs to do in the last game is tie, and they win the league. With Arsenal, things were a little bit different because Arsenal's results just came too many bad ones at the same time. They tied to Liverpool, which at the time, Liverpool was bouncing back, but they still should have won that game. They then tied to West Ham, which is unacceptable. They then tied to Southampton, which is unacceptable when you're trying to win a title. And then they go into a City game where City absolutely annihilates them. How do you prevent this? Well, everybody dealt with international break. It's true. Every team dealt with it. But it's two big international breaks because you had just come from Qatar and then you play a few games and now you're back playing for the Euro. And it's a big deal. A lot of people think it's not a big deal, but when you have a team that doesn't have as much depth, it's a problem. Let me explain. For Benfica, they're a team that were dominating the league, but as you could see, what was in the middle of this? Inter, right? Inter was in the middle of these games, and that's April 11th, April 19th. And even though it's not a big deal, Arsenal was playing in the Europa League, international break, and this extremely hard Premier League. And I think Arsenal just didn't have the depth. I said all that to say this. I don't think they had the depth. And as much as Gabriel Jesus is him, because he is, I think they still need someone that is more of a Haaland type striker, that Gabriel Jesus can run around and that number 9 can sit there and pop him into the back of the net. I think that's something that they could really use. Like a Haaland, like a Lukaku, like a Dzeko, like a Lewandowski, one of those guys that can really help you get through the West Ham games. These games here are extremely important. And they were winning this game, by the way, and that's you just can't drop this. They did what they had to do. They had defensively had to be right, and they weren't. And you know, when you look at it, how could this team, first of all, when you look at Arsenal's team, it's awesome that they actually completed for the title, because this team, there's a lot of teams in the Premier League that you would say man for man are better. Like if you look at Chelsea man for man, they probably have a better team. If you look at United man for man with Casemiro, with Varane, with people would say De Gea is better than, I'm not saying they are, but I'm saying on paper, you would probably say United. But on the field, Saka and stuff are just so much better. But this team needs stuff, man. This team needs depth. There is no depth. And you got to give Arteta props for what he did with this team in the quick turnaround of a season. He did very, very well. And then you got to also see the fact of two things. One, he was competing against an incredible City. And two, the international breaks. I don't care what anybody tells me. The international breaks were a problem. And a lot of people will say, absolutely, I'm extremely wrong. But if you even look at maybe a team like Napoli, Napoli was another team that was really, really dominating. And I would love to actually look at when their results kind of slowed down, because obviously they did get done in the Champions League by AC Milan. This was all the way in February. So in April 12th, they also lost. And they barely won. Wow. So again, what I'm saying, I want you to check this out. Napoli dominated all the way through 2-0, 3-0, 4-0. And right here is when the international break happens. And then on April 2nd, their first game back, they lose to AC Milan 4-0. Benfica lost to FC Porto 2-1. They beat Leeds, but then the next weekend tied to Liverpool. So they're the only team that came back and won. This is a very interesting thing, man, to look at. And then you look at Napoli again, and they barely got through this game on the 7th. And then they lost again. And then they tied, and then they tied. And then they barely won, and then they tied. So if you look at what Arsenal did, what Benfica did, and what Napoli did, Napoli and Benfica were lucky enough to have a huge advantage, and the teams that were chasing weren't Man City. Because although Porto was good, they're not having the best of years. They kept slipping as well. So at the end of the day, y'all might think I'm crazy, but that international Euro break messed up a lot of the teams that were in first place. Napoli maybe went out of the Champions League because of it. Benfica maybe went out of the Champions League because of it and almost lost their league. They have to tie this weekend coming up or win it at home against the team that's getting relegated, and they win the title. If they don't, then they messed up as well. And then AC Milan messed up. Arsenal messed up. So not only is it squad depth the biggest thing here, because it is the biggest thing, players leaving to go to international breaks when you don't have enough players and injuries happen causes this. And I know a lot of y'all will be like, Skills, this is an L take, but look around the leagues, man. Benfica after that break choked. Arsenal after that break choked. And Napoli, who arguably was one of the best teams in Europe up there with City and Benfica, they were the ones cooking the most, choked. They were supposed to be AC Milan, they choked. Benfica was supposed to be Inter, they were the favorites, they choked. And Arsenal was supposed to win the league, and they choked. So at the end of the day, the teams that weren't, besides Man City, let's leave them out of it because their depth is insane. AC Milan, Inter, teams that weren't having the best of seasons and players weren't as tired as the ones competing for the top are in the Champions League final. It's something to really, really think about. It is something to really think about, yo. It is a very interesting thing. But let's go back to Arsenal, man. They have this terrible funk after after the international break. What do they need? They need better veteranship, in my opinion. It's a great team. It's a young team. I think Jorginho was supposed to be the guy that was a veteran, I think they need someone like that. Their Milner. They need someone like their Kevin De Bruyne or their leader. They need someone to help Saka during moments like this, to help these players during moments like this. They then need maybe a little bit more on defense. Another midfielder could help as well. Maybe that's where you get the veteranship. And then I think a 9. Not that Gabriel Jesus is not him, because like I told you, I think he is him. But I think you do need that guy that can really, really bag in goals every single game. And not a young guy. I don't think you should go for a young guy. I don't think you should go for a Gonçalo Ramos or this or that. I think you should go for someone who's proven. And if they are young, they should have experience. Who? Tammy Abraham, the ex-Chelsea guy. I think that's a fantastic guy. Yes, he's still young, but I think the experience is, he's already played in the Prem. He's doing well in Italy. That's a good option, I think, maybe right there if they want to chase somebody like that. Ocean Man, he's obviously a good option. I think Vlahovic is going to be up for sale. I don't really know because he's kind of choked at Juve, but I heard he's going to be up for sale. Maybe you go for him. But again, he's still really young. So there's a lot of options for Arsenal, but I think Arsenal fans should keep their heads up. They should look at world football and understand what happened. Because in every league where the team was dominating, I didn't look at Barcelona. We probably could have looked at that. I don't know if Barcelona slipped up at all. But if you look properly at the leagues, you will notice the same thing I'm telling you. There was massive teams in first place that all slipped up in the same exact point. And it was directly after the Euro qualifiers, the first Euro qualifiers. Not Qatar World Cup, the second international break of the season, absolutely destroyed Arsenal, Benfica, and Napoli. The difference is Napoli and Benfica, Napoli already won their league. Benfica's a tie or a win away from winning their league. And Arsenal, unfortunately, lost their league. But also Arsenal probably should have maybe won the Europa League if they really went for that. So at the end of the day, lads, I think Arsenal fans should keep their heads up. I think the reason this season went bad was because of international break and not having enough depth during that time. You guys let me know in the comments down below. Did I make sense? Did I not make sense? I showed you my receipts. I did my homework. I did my study. I did my time. You let me know what you think, man. Is the boys' ball knowledge on point, or is it just a no? And then before I leave here, let's just remind you of one thing. City are them. City are ticking on all cylinders. Again, Arsenal was dominating while City were trying to find their identity. They were a good enough team to bounce back when they found their identity. They have enough depth. They got Jack finally playing well. Bernardo Silva is a magician, magic man. I can't, magician, you know what I'm saying? Magician, magic man on the ball. Haaland is him. Kevin De Bruyne is amazing. Back line looks incredible with Aki, Stones, and Ruben Diaz. Stones is more playing like a defensive mid nowadays because he just runs up the field. And the team is cooking. So at the end of the day, Arsenal are a little bit more unlucky than Benfica and thing because they were going up against a team like City. But at the end of the day, I think Arsenal had a great year. I think they did well. I think it's time to build off of this and come back and try again next year. Lads, it's been your boy Skills. Let me know what you think about that ball take knowledge. Did I have it? Is it L? Is it a dub? What do you think? Appreciate you guys watching. Arsenal fans, keep your head up, man. It wasn't a bad a bad year. And City fans, congratulations. Y'all were amazing. Hopefully, Benfica win. We're out of here. Peace.